The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, emerged from the ashes of World War II, a beacon of hope against Soviet expansionism. Founded in 1949, this alliance pledged to safeguard freedom. The U.S. stood as the guarantor of European security. Yet, doubts about U.S. commitment persisted. Could Europe rely on the U.S. in a crisis? The shadow of isolationism loomed large. The Soviet threat was tangible. The U.S. had to prove its commitment. This challenge defined U.S. involvement in NATO. In 1966, Charles de Gaulle withdrew France from NATO's integrated military command, exposing alliance tensions. The Nixon Doctrine in 1969 emphasized allies' responsibility for their own defense. This shift fueled European anxieties about American commitment. The seeds of doubt threatened the transatlantic partnership. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the subsequent collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of the Cold War. For NATO, the demise of its long-standing adversary triggered an existential crisis. With the threat of Soviet aggression seemingly extinguished, questions arose about the alliance's continued relevance. Some argued that NATO had outlived its usefulness and should be disbanded. Others maintained that the alliance remained essential for maintaining stability in a world grappling with new security challenges. The post-Cold War era witnessed a period of adaptation and expansion for NATO. The alliance embraced new roles, engaging in peacekeeping operations in the Balkans and supporting the US-led intervention in Afghanistan. Yet, despite these efforts, NATO continued to grapple with internal divisions and uncertainty about its long-term future. The fear of US abandonment found new expression in the context of shifting global power dynamics. The legacy of uncertainty continued to shape NATO's trajectory. At the heart of NATO lies Article 5, a testament to the principle of collective defense that binds its members. This pivotal article, enshrined in the Washington Treaty of 1949, declares that an attack against one ally is considered an attack against all. It is a solemn vow of mutual support, a cornerstone of the alliance's strength. Article 5, however, is not a rigid blueprint for automatic military response. It is a framework that allows for flexibility in action, reflecting the complexities of international relations. The wording of Article 5 is deliberately broad, allowing each member to determine the nature and extent of its response. This carefully crafted language reflects a delicate balance between commitment and autonomy. It acknowledges the sovereign right of each member to determine its response while emphasizing collective responsibility. The United States sought to avoid overly prescriptive language that could limit its options. The resulting compromise aimed to reconcile these competing interests. The flexibility enshrined in Article 5 allows NATO members to respond to threats in a manner tailored to their individual capabilities. This adaptability has been evident throughout the alliance's history, from the Cold War standoff to more recent crises. Member states have demonstrated a spectrum of contributions ranging from the deployment of combat troops to logistical support and intelligence sharing. This nuanced approach recognizes that security is not a one-size-fits-all concept. The spectrum of responses permissible under Article 5 is vast, encompassing military, political, economic, and humanitarian measures. A nation with a powerful military might choose to deploy troops, while a smaller nation might provide logistical support or humanitarian aid. Some members might focus on strengthening their cyber defenses or countering disinformation campaigns. This flexibility allows NATO to leverage the diverse strengths of its members. The absence of a rigid, predetermined response mechanism in Article 5 is a source of strength. It allows NATO to adapt to evolving security environments. The aftermath of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks on the United States provided a stark example of Article 5's flexibility in action. For the first and only time in its history, NATO invoked Article 5, recognizing the attacks on the United States as an assault on all members. The response was not a monolithic deployment of forces under a single command structure. Each member nation determined its own contribution to the subsequent operations in Afghanistan. Some NATO members, such as the United Kingdom, Canada, and Germany, committed significant military forces. Others provided logistical support, training for Afghan security forces, or financial aid. Still, others focused on humanitarian efforts, working to rebuild infrastructure and provide essential services. This varied response underscored the adaptable nature of Article 5. The Afghanistan intervention highlighted the challenges inherent in managing a complex multinational operation. Disagreements arose over burden sharing, underscoring the need for clear communication and realistic expectations. How to balance national sovereignty with collective action within NATO? This question has been a recurring theme throughout NATO's history. Striking the right balance remains an ongoing challenge. Free riding and defense spending disagreements persist. Article 5 exposes these divisions. Crises test member willingness to act. New challenges demand innovative responses. NATO's adaptability is crucial for relevance. The election of Donald Trump as President of the United States in 2016 sent shockwaves through NATO. Trump, known for his unconventional foreign policy views, openly questioned the value of the alliance. This rhetoric cast a shadow of uncertainty over the future of the transatlantic partnership. Trump's pronouncement seemed to confirm the worst fears of those who had long harbored doubts about the reliability of American guarantees. His emphasis on America First principles suggested a potential shift away from the collective defense posture. European leaders found themselves grappling with the implications of Trump's transactional approach to security. The Trump administration's approach to NATO was characterized by confrontational rhetoric and demands for increased burden sharing. Concerns about European defense spending had been a recurring theme in transatlantic relations for decades. Trump's more assertive approach brought these long-simmering tensions to the fore. This exposed the underlying frictions within the alliance and forced a reassessment of the balance between American commitments and European responsibilities. At the heart of the Trump administration's critique of NATO lay the issue of defense spending. Trump argued that the United States was shouldering a disproportionate share of the burden for European defense. He pointed to the 2% of GDP defense spending target as a benchmark for measuring commitment. Trump's focus on defense spending often overlooked the complexities of the issue. Several European allies, particularly those on NATO's eastern flank, have consistently met or exceeded the 2% target. Focusing solely on the 2% target risks overlooking the qualitative aspects of defense contributions. Some NATO members, despite spending less than 2% of GDP on defense, possess highly capable militaries. Others, while meeting the spending target, may have less advanced militaries or face budgetary constraints. A comprehensive assessment of burden sharing requires considering not just the quantity of spending, but also the quality and deployability of military forces. Contributions to non-military aspects of security, such as intelligence sharing and cyber defense, are also crucial. While Trump's rhetoric about NATO often generated headlines and fueled anxieties about a potential transatlantic rift, the reality of U.S. policy during his presidency told a somewhat different story. Despite his criticisms of the alliance and his demands for increased burden sharing, Trump did not withdraw the United States from NATO, nor did he reduce the U.S. military presence in Europe. In fact, during his presidency, the United States increased its military spending in Europe, deploying additional troops and equipment to NATO's eastern flank as a deterrent against potential Russian aggression. This apparent contradiction between Trump's rhetoric and actions reflects the complex interplay of domestic political considerations, strategic realities, and the enduring significance of the transatlantic alliance for U.S. interests. While Trump may have sought to appease his domestic base by challenging European allies on defense spending and questioning the value of multilateral institutions, he also recognized the importance of NATO as a bulwark against Russian expansionism and as a platform for projecting U.S. power and influence on the global stage. The continuation of U.S. military commitments to NATO during his presidency, despite his often critical pronouncements, suggests that, even for a president skeptical of traditional alliances, the strategic logic of the transatlantic partnership remained compelling. Moreover, Trump's pressure on European allies to increase their defense spending, while often delivered in a confrontational manner, did have some tangible effects. Several NATO members, prompted in part by Trump's criticisms and by the growing perception of a resurgent Russian threat, increased their defense budgets and made progress towards meeting the 2% of GDP target. While it is difficult to disentangle the precise impact of Trump's rhetoric from other factors influencing defense spending decisions, his presidency undoubtedly contributed to a renewed focus on European security and a recognition of the need for greater burden sharing within the alliance. The Trump era, despite its tumultuous nature, did not fundamentally alter NATO's core dynamics. The alliance emerged with its principles intact and commitment to collective defense reaffirmed. However, Trump's approach exposed vulnerabilities, highlighting the need for adaptation. Biden's presidency provided a respite and sought to repair transatlantic relations. Yet challenges like burden sharing and equitable responsibilities remain unresolved. NATO faces a complex security environment with evolving threats. Adapting structures and decision-making is crucial for continued relevance. This requires dialogue, compromise, and a shared sense of purpose. The specter of a resurgent Russia, flexing its military muscles and asserting its influence beyond its borders, has loomed large over European security since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. This resurgence, fueled by nationalist sentiment and economic ambitions, has led to heightened tensions with the West and concerns about potential conflict along NATO's eastern flank. However, Russia's economic limitations and military challenges constrain its ability to sustain large-scale operations. A full-scale Russian attack on a NATO member remains highly unlikely, as it would trigger Article 5, obligating all members to defend the attacked country. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine, ignited by Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, has become a strategic quagmire for Moscow, draining resources and galvanizing Western opposition. Economic sanctions and increased NATO deployments have exposed the limits of Moscow's power. The Ukrainian military, bolstered by Western support, has put up fierce resistance. The conflict has settled into a protracted war of attrition, straining Russia's resources. Even if Russia achieves its objectives, the victory would come at a high cost. The Ukrainian quagmire underscores the limits of Russia's military power. Section 3. The Sleeping Giants: Europe's Untapped Potential. Europe boasts a large economy and advanced military capabilities. The EU's GDP dwarfs Russia's, translating into potential military spending. European nations possess significant military assets, including advanced fighter jets, tanks, and warships. Increased defense spending and cooperation could transform NATO into a formidable force. PESCO aims to deepen defense integration within the EU. Section 4. The Power of Perception, Deterrence in the Age of Ambiguity. In international relations, perception is as important as reality. Deterrence relies on military capabilities and the credibility of commitments. NATO's power rests on the belief in a swift, decisive response. Credible deterrence requires understanding the psychology of deterrence. Strategic ambiguity leaves adversaries guessing about intentions. This uncertainty can deter potential aggressors. The U.S. uses strategic ambiguity, especially with China and Taiwan. This policy has maintained peace in the Taiwan Strait for decades. Section 1. The Shifting Sands of Power. Looking ahead to 2030. Gazing into the crystal ball of geopolitics is always a risky endeavor, but some trends are clear enough to warrant consideration. As the calendar flips towards 2030, the global landscape will likely look vastly different than it does today. The tectonic plates of power are shifting, with potential ramifications for NATO and the transatlantic relationship. Europe is on a trajectory towards greater strategic autonomy. Leadership changes in Russia and the United States could introduce new uncertainties and opportunities. European defense investments are projected to continue increasing. This trend could result in a more capable European defense architecture by 2030. Enhanced interoperability and burden sharing could bolster Europe's ability to act independently. Greater European strategic autonomy does not necessarily weaken the transatlantic alliance. A more capable Europe could strengthen NATO by creating a balanced partnership with the United States. Both sides must adapt to leverage their strengths without succumbing to rivalry or disunity. The year 2030 looms as a pivotal juncture in Russian politics. Vladimir Putin will be approaching his 80th birthday, raising questions about his long-term grip on power. The twilight of Putin's reign could usher in uncertainty and instability for Russia. A change in leadership could have unpredictable consequences for European security. A new leader might escalate tensions with the West or offer a reset in relations. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, born in the crucible of the Cold War, has proven to be a remarkably resilient and adaptable alliance, emerging from each challenge transformed but unbroken. As NATO navigates the uncertainties of the 21st century, its ability to adapt will be crucial to its relevance. The alliance that thrives will embrace change and leverage its diverse strengths. From its inception, amid the ashes of World War II, NATO has faced constant challenges, internal disagreements, and external threats. The alliance has consistently defied predictions of its demise, demonstrating a remarkable capacity for adaptation and reinvention. Rooted in shared values and strategic interests, NATO remains a cornerstone of international security. Its ability to adapt to new realities and forge a shared vision for the future is crucial. NATO's adaptability is evident throughout its history. Originally a bulwark against Soviet expansion, NATO now addresses new security challenges. Its evolution and adherence to core principles ensure its relevance in a changing world. One of the most persistent challenges facing NATO is the issue of burden sharing, the equitable distribution of responsibilities and costs among its members. The alliance, founded on the principle of collective defense, relies on the willingness of its members to contribute to their own security and to come to the aid of others in times of need. This principle, enshrined in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, has been a cornerstone of NATO's deterrent power, but it has also been a source of friction and disagreement, particularly between the United States and its European allies. The United States, historically the dominant military power within NATO, has long argued that its European partners should shoulder a greater share of the burden for their own defense. This argument, often framed in terms of fairness and fiscal responsibility, gained traction during the Trump administration, which adopted a more confrontational approach to burden sharing, demanding that European allies increase their defense spending to meet the agreed-upon target of 2% of GDP. While this pressure did lead to some increases in defense budgets, it also exposed underlying tensions within the alliance and raised questions about the long-term sustainability of the transatlantic security partnership. Finding a sustainable solution to the burden-sharing dilemma will require a combination of pragmatism, political will, and a recognition of the shared interests and responsibilities of all NATO members. The United States, while justified in expecting its allies to contribute their fair share, must also recognize that European security concerns and priorities are not always identical to its own. European allies, for their part, must demonstrate a greater willingness to invest in their own defense and to take on a more active role in shaping NATO's strategic direction rather than relying on the United States to provide both the resources and the vision for the alliance. One of the most persistent challenges facing NATO is the issue of burden sharing, the equitable distribution of responsibilities and costs among its members. The alliance, founded on the principle of collective defense, relies on the willingness of its members to contribute to their own security and to come to the aid of others in times of need. This principle, enshrined in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, has been a cornerstone of NATO's deterrent power, but it has also been a source of friction and disagreement, particularly between the United States and its European allies. The United States, historically the dominant military power within NATO, has long argued that its European partners should shoulder a greater share of the burden for their own defense. This argument, often framed in terms of fairness and fiscal responsibility, gained traction during the Trump administration, which adopted a more confrontational approach to burden sharing, demanding that European allies increase their defense spending to meet the agreed-upon target of 2% of GDP. While this pressure did lead to some increases in defense budgets, it also exposed underlying tensions within the alliance and raised questions about the long-term sustainability of the transatlantic security partnership. Finding a sustainable solution to the burden-sharing dilemma will require a combination of pragmatism, political will, and a recognition of the shared interests and responsibilities of all NATO members. The United States, while justified in expecting its allies to contribute their fair share, must also recognize that European security concerns and priorities are not always identical to its own. European allies, for their part, must demonstrate a greater willingness to invest in their own defense and to take on a more active role in shaping NATO's strategic direction rather than relying on the United States to provide both the resources and the vision for the alliance. The future of NATO is not preordained. The alliance, with its legacy of resilience and shared values, can emerge stronger and more united. This requires revitalizing the transatlantic partnership and adapting to new realities. A transatlantic renaissance is essential for addressing complex security challenges. Dialogue within NATO and between the US and Europe is crucial. Open discussions about strategic priorities and burden sharing are key. The Biden administration emphasizes diplomacy and alliance building. This shift must be accompanied by concrete actions and sustained commitment. European nations must contribute more effectively to collective defense. This includes increasing defense spending and enhancing cooperation. A cohesive Europe strengthens NATO and enhances the West's ability to deter aggression and promote stability.
So hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and let's turn the page on a new adventure together. Get ready to experience books like never before, only on VBook 360. Like, comment, and share to support the channel and keep the video magic alive. Thank you for stopping by. And remember, every video has a story, and every story deserves to be shared. See you in the next video.